My name is Zadie Xa, and I'm a Canadian-Korean artist. I'm currently based in London, where I've been for the past 12 years. And I work across installation and painting, performance, sound, sometimes video, and I often collaborate with people, including Benito Mayor Vallejo, who is my partner. So this is my first time ever visiting Sharjah, and I think the first thing I noticed about the city, but also particularly about the site where we're installed, is the light. I live in London, so we don't often get sun. The light and the reflection off the water has made the biggest impression on me, and it's actually really helped inform the installation and how we decided to present things whilst we were here painting the murals. Before coming to the site to install, I had already imagined how the murals would be. And so there was always going to be an idea of a horizon and a sun or moon setting across the water. And I think specifically where we're situated, whereas the views are really, really spectacular, whether you're in the gallery or outside. And I'm hoping that being within this space also reflects a kind of almost mirrored image, an attempt at a mirrored image of what's outside. It's probably the only way in which this installation could have been presented, because every single time I'm in a new landscape, I try to kind of embody and absorb some of the new things that I'm seeing, and even if it's unconscious, those things end up filtering within the artwork. I think I have synthesized a lot of my ideas for this installation, not only with the murals, but also with the paintings, specifically for the Sharjah Biennial and specifically for Alhamria Studios, because I knew I would be situated near water. Water and themes of marine life and the ocean have been really big parts of my practice for the past 10 years. But spending more time in more, I would say, like Mediterranean-like settings in terms of just the light and the quality of the water is something that's newer to me. So I grew up in Vancouver on the West Coast, where the ocean is very dark and it's cold and we have a different light. And also living in England, there are beaches, but of course the light and the color of the water is really different. So one of the things I'm really excited about in this installation is 3-pieced sound work that will be channeled out of 3 different shells that will be hung in 3 corners of the space. So audience members, viewers will be able to approach these sculptures and listen to sonic landscapes and perhaps some talking and voices that are being channeled through these shells. Another thing that I'm really excited about that's connected to these digital sound works will be a suspended chandelier-like wind chime inspired sculpture that will be suspended from the center of the gallery. And this sculpture will be shown in the shape of a large conch shell, and it will be made out of around 650 brass bells. And so I've always been interested in the idea of shells as an idea of home, an analogy for a communication receptor or device where we can hold it to our ears and listen to either stories of the sea or perhaps use it as a telephone or a microphone. But in this case, with this center work, I was interested in kind of creating this ghost-like shape that mimics the shell, but also is static if no one touches it, so it's silent. But because it's made out of these 600+ bells, the idea is that if there is vibration in the room, or a gust of wind, or if someone were to physically touch them, you would obviously hear the jingling and clanging of these bells. These bells are inspired by Korean shamanic ritual bells, and a lot of global religions and spiritual practices, bells are used to call in the spirits or to, in some ways, add prayer. And so I was really interested in this idea of wind chimes and how usually by the sea or in places where there might be wind, you know, people place these wind chimes outside their house and you have this gentle jingle sound which is often, I think, less about the actual bells and more about the invisible presence of the wind. So it's actually the wind that's showing itself to us when we hear that sound. The wall works that I've made for the biennial are an extension of my textile practice, actually. So in the past, I've worked a lot with colored linen, and I've made what I call kind of like patchwork assemblages, which are in reference to a traditional Korean patchwork called pojagi. And I've always been really interested in this practice because it was done traditionally in a communal setting and also done by people who were not considered artists. And it was a practice of necessity in many ways because it was usually done by people, particularly women, who might not have had a lot of materials around them. So a practice born out of economic scarcity where people would save pieces of fabric, sew them together to create what are called cloth wrappings. So I've combined this idea of patchwork and assemblage with geometric shapes. And instead of using pre-colored pieces of linen, I've used painter's linen and then used painting materials on top of them. So this is kind of the first time I've been able to experiment with this practice of using the painted image on top of these textiles, because I think previously I would have done those things separately. This is, I think, the first time I've had to paint a mural, and I did that with my fellow artist, Benito. And I think I was just worried because I had never done this before on this scale. And so there needs to be a bit of an impetus of having like bravery, where you just go for it and you think if there's mistakes, you fix them. I'm lucky enough where I usually work with kind of a small circle of collaborators. And in this case, I worked again with Benito and someone else back home named Sheng. And each of the iterations of a performance or an exhibition are kind of a continuation of one another. So I always learn from the experience of being in situ and installing a work or an installation, but also thinking about ways in which that can grow and transform. I think people who are familiar with my work will recognize similar themes that I've been working with, like our relationship with landscape, to each other, and to marine wildlife particularly. Whilst you're making stuff in your studio or even on site here when you're just amongst a small group of people, the working process is very intimate. And then I suppose the day before the opening, or when things like photography or interviews happen, you start getting nervous because you realize that really intimate space where you're making something becomes public, and that you're showing people kind of really profound or deep ideas that you've been working on for the past year. Or, you know, in many cases, and in my case, it's an extension of a practice. So it's maybe 10 or 12 or 15 years of ideas and thoughts that each time develop and hopefully grow. And, you know, you're sharing these intimate parts of yourself and your research with people you've never met before.